let's start the industry invited speaker session. And this time we'd like to welcome Anita Byrne from Forum8 Australia. Before starting our session, let me briefly introduce Forum8. Forum8 is a worldwide leading software developer for VR applications, especially centering around civil engineering. Every year you can see their latest work and products at CIGAF Asia booth, exhibition booth. And also, Forum8 particularly supports CIGAF Asia as its platinum sponsor. So we very much appreciate their continuous help and support for our CIGAF conferences. And Anita is the director of Forum8 Australia, and today she'll present their activities and VR applications in real industry. So let's welcome Anita.
Not sure if I need this. Is it on? Thank you, Ken, for the introduction, and thank you everybody for coming to my little talk. I don't want to sound like too much of an imposter today because I am actually an industry person. I'm not a researcher. I'm not a software developer myself. But I have been responsible for technical software for 30 years or so. I used to have a company in Japan, my own company. I sold Australian applications into Japan. A lot of those were sort of civil engineering type applications. And for 10 years, I've been associated with Forum8. I've been back here and associated with Forum8. So obviously I speak Japanese, I have a Japanese background. Just telling you a little bit about Forum8 if you don't know much about it. As Ken said, it's a civil engineering, most of the software has focused on civil engineering. It was actually a spin out of another Japanese company about 30 years ago. They're about a $50 million Australian dollar company, about 200 something people, and quite a lot of offices around Japan, with some of them are R&D, some of them are software development, some of them are sales, and especially focused on Asia, some international sales offices, Vietnam, Myanmar, Taiwan, Shanghai, and I represent them in Australia. There's a Western region office in the UK. Recently, in addition to, I'll talk more about our VR activities in a little bit, but recently Forum8 has been involved in some M&A, and probably people from Japan will know a product called Shade 3D, which has been around again since the start of graphics software back in the 90s probably. Anyway, recently they bought the assets of Shade 3D and incorporated it into the company. So that was a product that was very advanced for its time. I remember it when I used to be in Japan. So anyway, that product will be reinvigorated and as part of the Forum8 family. There's some other M&A that's happened. Krava, a game development company, embedded systems, and something more related to FEM. Most of our activities have been in VR, but in terms of AR, there's a recent investment in a company called Premium Arts in Japan, which does services around AR. I can't really tell you too much about it, but if AR is something that you'd like to talk to us about, I'm sure Forum8 would be interested in hearing from you. Another company we've collaborated with is Arc Bazaar. So they have, it's a US-based company where people put up their design projects and people bid for them. It's one of those sort of website bidding services. Anyway, we've invested in that company as well. In Japan, you probably know this about Japan, that there are, government puts money into industry focuses, you know, and recently the government has invested a bit of money in VR and having a common VR platform. So Forum 8's been involved in working with other companies in what's called the VR Promotion Council, and so to promote a common platform. We've also done a lot of work with some collaborators in things like projection mapping. So people in Australia will know, what is it called?
Vivid? Vivid.
Vivid, yes. So anyway, Forum 8, that's another area of activity with some of our collaborating companies in Japan. And as Ken mentioned, Forum 8 has supported SIGGRAPH Asia as a platinum sponsor for a number of years now. And this is pictures of Tokyo, but we will have a big booth down here in Brisbane as well. So please come over and see what we will have, which is a number of, this is what we're having at our booth. Although a lot of work that we do is around simulation and driving simulation and pedestrian simulation and things like that, this year we're really focused on things like the VR motion seat. So try various experiences to try train simulator, VR 360 simulator. There'll be Shade 3D and a little bit of driving simulation. Also VR experience with Japanese drumming. Until yesterday, every year Forum 8 has what they call the Design Festival, and on the themes that you can see there. So it just finished yesterday, and for students and academics out there, I'd really encourage you to look next year at our Cloud Programming World Cup and our Design World Cup. So these are competitions for students where the results are announced at our Design Festival, but they have 6 months to produce virtual reality design in urban planning, on an urban planning theme. That's the BIM and VR design contest. And the Cloud Programming World Cup is more about using our SDK to add features to our software, to our base software. So I'll talk a little bit more about the sort of projects that students have done. And obviously there are monetary prizes, and they get to come tickets to Tokyo. So yeah, I'd encourage you to look out for that, which is always announced around March, April, and obviously with an end to completion around now. I'll talk a little bit about our major product in the VR space, which is in Japan and Asia called UC Winroad. In a lot of the rest of the parts of the world, it's called VR Design Studio. And so actually the concept for this product was an urban planning tool. So the former chairman of the company lived in Christchurch in New Zealand and wondered why Japanese urban planners couldn't produce a sort of beautiful garden city that was Christchurch, particularly before the earthquake, I think. So this is back in the late 90s. So anyway, some money was put in, and actually the development was actually done in Christchurch to start with. So Forum 8 had a development team in Christchurch, and released this product, virtual, but based on OpenGL and using NVIDIA chips for the graphics. So those two things came together with the development team in Christchurch, and the first version of this software that I'll show you in a minute was released back in early 2000s. It won Software Product of the Year in 2002. So, I mean, these are the sort of simple sort of VR experiences that were available in the first version. Very quickly though, the product, because of various requests from users, I guess, Look, Japanese companies are very user-driven in terms of software development. So very quickly, additional features like traffic simulation and driving simulation were added to the software. So, from 2004 or so, we started talking about driving simulation. And that's a lot of the work that I've done in Australia actually has been around using the software as a base for driving simulation, driver training, driver research. So I can talk in some detail about that. We also have a cloud version of the software, and where, so you can, on your smartphone or tablet, you can also do some VR stuff, streaming from the cloud. So the base software is used to develop a 3D virtual model of an environment, and that's often a city. But it doesn't have to be. It can be any sort of environment. I would say it's mainly land-based. It's not the software that you use for flight simulation necessarily, but it is for land-based stuff. And if I just jump out of this, I can show you in real time the software. So this is our product. Obviously, it's real-time graphics. You can move around. You can jump around different. And this is Australia, obviously. It's patent. It's some work we did a few years ago. So we actually, or some of my collaborators, developed this software, this model. It's based on Byrne, if people know Byrne down the Gold Coast. So what we did was, the software incorporates a 3D, DEM, digital elevation model. So terrain, basically, from the NASA SRTM database. So the way you can develop a model is you start with some terrain, which can be the real terrain. In this case, we overlaid an aerial photo, which you can turn on and off like this. These lines here are the roads, but that doesn't have to be a road. It could be a footpath, could be a railway track, could be whatever. And if I double click one of these, say this one, you can see, for anyone who's civil engineering related, you can see that this is probably nobody here, but you can see that this is based on civil engineering design principles. So basically you modify these points here. And you can also import data from other software. So it could be GIS type software, it could be CAD, all sorts of software can be used as a base. And it does do some real-time processing. But, for me to do a new road, for example, I just click this. So you don't have to be a road designer, which I'm not. But I can just do a line, center line, double click that. Anyway, that's very rough. It will automatically assign a section to it. If I go out to the 3D view, there's my road there. The easiest way to experience it is then to drive along it. So I can drive on that new road, choose my vehicle, and anyway, that's just a very simple thing that you can do. And obviously you can put other traffic there. So there's we have a traffic simulation model in the software. So if I wanted to do traffic, it takes a little bit more work, but generate traffic, so a volume of traffic on that road, a mixture of vehicles, and then I can generate a little bit. So there's my other vehicles there. And I can click into them. Oh, whoops. It's no good. Okay, anyway. gave you a very brief, so I think from that you got a very, an idea that, you know, the software, you start with terrain, you build up the environment. Buildings and things like that can be point and click. You can just drop stuff in. We have pedestrians, so pedestrians can be in a crowd, so a crowd of pedestrians, or following a particular flight path. So that, it does have all those tools for developing the sort of simulated environments that we focus on. So I think I've explained this. As I mentioned, we link with a whole range of other software, so it could be civil type CAD, it could be 3D modeling, it could be point cloud. So actually our point cloud plugin is very efficient in terms of you know, processing points. And obviously driving simulation, that's an extra plugin, and we can link with, I know you're not civil engineers, but if you're into more detailed traffic simulation modeling, so there are products called Vissim and AimSum, so we can link with other analysis products and bring that those results in. I didn't show you, but you can obviously do all sorts of simulation, daytime, nighttime, strip lights, headlights. The company in Japan has worked with Japanese headlight manufacturers, so our headlight model, for example, headlight simulation is really good. Snow and fog, all of those sort of things can be just a press of a button. I mentioned that we're a software company, but so we don't make simulators aside from plug and play, you know, Logitech sort of type setups. We can do that, but we can link with anyone else's simulator. We do have a relationship with a Korean company called InnoSim. So these sort of driving sims, I have a number in Australia, but with or without motion platform. This sort of one here, multi-million-dollar type 8 8 degrees of freedom in China research lab, transport research lab. And we've been saying VR, we've been saying VR since, you know, 2002, but nowadays people talk about VR and they mean headsets. I know this group, not necessarily, but the general public. So we do support VR with Oculus and HTC. We've got a Fove plugin, if people know that. It's a headset with eye tracking. And at our booth, you'll see some hands-free driving using this sort of Mindwave mobile device. Oh, yes, okay. Some of the recent developments that are more related to autonomous driving and, well, car-mounted cameras. So we've worked on some new features to do that. I can't talk to this in detail, but we're working on a product called VR Next, and it's physical-based rendering. So people probably know more about that than me. But anyway, we have development plans in the pipeline for that are related to the VR Cloud product that I mentioned. This would be VR Next, but also related to cloud streaming. And some of the other things. I mentioned Shade 3D, so yeah, these are the sort of things that come out of Shade 3D. I'm going to talk a little bit about the applications that I'm most familiar with, because these are things that we've done in Australia with my users. And how am I going for time?
About 5 minutes.
Okay. So one of just the software standalone, what are the applications? So one of the applications is visualization of new infrastructure. So for example, we did this project for the City of Nedlands in WA, where they wanted to just a very simple thing. They wanted to make some changes at an intersection, you know, take away the parking. Some shopkeepers were affected, put an extra lane in the intersection, things like that. So the council needed to talk to the community about it and get some PR around it. So a very simple model. If I click, oh dear, okay. Don't have that. Don't have that link. This is very, very short video. So this is just a movie of the thing. But anyway, just really, really simple for us project where they wanted to. The complicated thing was it's an 8-phase traffic light. So 8 phases on the lights, if you know traffic simulation. So anyway, we simulated all that. And that's something that's embedded in the software. You don't need to do anything special to simulate that. It's near, if anyone, Ulrich was from Perth. This is something else. We have also done modelling of much larger projects, one of which was the Hunter Expressway in New South Wales. So 40 kilometres of road with all the interchanges and things like that. So obviously once you have a 3D model, you can output movies and things like that. This is a newer application related to that project I talked about, the VR Promotion Council. So working on a common VR platform in Japan. And so again, similar purpose, a new Shinkansen station for Sapporo in the Northern Island. And one of the things they focused on was movement of pedestrians inside the station. So, used our software for walking simulation, crowd with a predicted volume, and digital signage was another focus. So I do have a movie of this, I think. Sorry, Japanese subtitles. But showing the walking route, things like this. I'm sure you've all seen, there's quite a lot of projects these days in Australia that have, virtual reality visualization is demanded almost for train projects and road projects. So. Okay, anyway, you get the idea. I'm going to talk about this tomorrow because I'm giving a talk at the autonomous driving workshop tomorrow. I'll talk more about autonomous driving and intelligent transport applications. But this was some work that, again, we did the modelling, which is why I can show it to you, for Transport for New South Wales, the Centre for Road Safety. This is in Wollongong, south of Sydney. Anyway, there's a very steep hill, for people who don't know it, very steep hill. The trucks have to go, there's a lot of truck traffic down to Port Kembla, and the trucks are going 40 and the cars are going 80, and there's a lot of trucks. So it's an ideal situation for some intelligent transport application for control of the vehicle-to-vehicle and vehicle-to-infrastructure communication. So anyway, before they put any devices into trucks or roadside, they wanted to simulate what the driver's experience would be, to test out the HMI as well, to test out what would be appearing on the screen, and just to educate the truck drivers about what would happen, or what would happen to their truck. Obviously limited to 40, but the sort of experience they'd have. So I do have a little movie of this as well. They basically tested 3 things. So one of them was they're all vehicle to vehicle stuff. So this is as you come down to the bottom of the hill. There'll be intersection. I'll just speed it up a bit. A vehicle comes from the left in a minute. And you won't hear the sound, but there's also an audible sound when the truck appears. There we are. But there was also a sound, like spoken sound actually. Left. So anyway, simulating that sort of thing. The next one is more like forward collision warning, as it says. Takes a while. And this was, they had a simple driving simulator. So the drivers were able to drive and experience, but also sort of just sit there and experience. So 2 modes of use. And the third one was when the vehicle ahead brakes suddenly, and you get a warning as well. So you can see that mainly here we modelled, it was actually 11 k's of road, not much of the buildings on either side, just trees and things like that. So, but the vehicle, the truck, and all the performance profiles that go with those vehicles. So here, it's a bit hopeless without the sound actually. But anyway, you get the image. We've also worked with Japanese automotive manufacturers, the whole range of them. This was something that's rather old now, but when Toyota first was talking about CITS work, and they're putting lane keeping assistance and that sort of thing in their vehicles. They also used our software to develop these sort of models, which they showed at very loud.
Please follow the arrows and drive accordingly. The
Anyway,
arrow is
it's
the path
something
to
that they
follow.
used at an exhibition.
When
to,
turning left or right, please use your turn signal. First, please experience the benefits of vehicle-to-vehicle safety systems.
I won't go through it. But again, similar sort of application where the person in the simulator could experience what all these sort of automated, autonomous driver assist functions would be like. A lot of my users in Australia are actually universities who have our software, and can be a simple driving sim, which is just a Logitech-based wheel, or a more car-like one. And they're doing various research on driver behaviour. So this is one of them. Byrne University, they have no shortage of applicants for their testing, but they test drugs and alcohol, driving, all sorts of things. But they're one of the leading groups in Australia that does this sort of work in impaired driving. What's wrong with my link? And one of my other users, again, human behaviour, but more psychological. So Macquarie Uni have done various projects related to when you stop at a traffic light, the length of time that you're stopped makes you forget that you're in a school zone, for example. So in Australia, you have to drive 40 in a school zone. If you stop for more than 2 minutes, for example, do you forget that you're in a school zone? And people do. So anyway, study that sort of effect. Sorry. And finally, just like to talk about a driver training application that we did for a company called Cube Ports in Australia. So they are a company that does a lot of port logistics, and they wanted a training application for their drivers who drive cars on and off ships. So basically, too many cars were getting damaged. They needed to prove to their customers, you know, in Europe and Japan, the car companies and their, you know, shipping companies, that they were making some improvements in their driver training. And so again, with our help, this application was developed. It's where is my progress is not working well. Again, a movie. Our shadow processing has improved since this, but this is based on Port Kembla, south of this largest place in Australia where they import cars like this. And so a ship out the dock, and here's the training center. That's the simulator that we supplied. As I said, we don't make simulators, but we can supply them. So, you know, it's an environment where it's very prescribed in terms of how you drive. 20 k's on the deck, 12 down the ramp, different speeds on the wharf. We are driving out of ship. You have to drive in convoy, keep a certain distance with the car in front. Got better headlights now too. Rain. Better rain effects. Then. Flagman who comes out and signals. So we can also load vehicles onto the ship. What I want to show you is at the end you can replay what the driver has done. Sorry. And points are deducted. So everything the driver does is logged, and points are deducted as they go through. So keeping to an ideal course, pedal and steering control, speed control, keeping an ideal distance with the car in front, collision into, you know, walls or, you know, witches' hats and things like that. So anyway, the driver gets a result, and that goes in their, you know, the HR use it in their record. So yeah, that's pretty much what I had prepared to show everybody today. And as I said, I'll be talking tomorrow at an autonomous driving thing, and also Forum 8 will be at SIGGRAPH, and welcome your attendance at our booth. So thank you very much.
Thank you. So do you have some questions or comments? Is it okay? So Anita, when you have a cooperation with Toyota, for example, then what's the role difference between your company and Toyota? Because some specification could come from like Toyota, but everything should be done by your company or?
Well, you know, there are different models basically, but what we provide is a software package. So, I mean, in terms of my ideal model for business here in Australia and New Zealand too, actually, is selling the software package that does include all these functions that I've shown you, you know, terrain and just the very basics that I showed you at the start, but also the driving simulation. So all of that is part of a package that you can buy. The maximum price is around $20,000. So, it's different levels depending on what functions you want. So, but inevitably, for Japanese companies in particular, we get involved in doing
Probably, I suppose so.
building the model, supplying the simulator, so inevitably, and also adding on, as I mentioned, there's an SDK, so you can add on functions. So yeah, software business, well, it's tricky, isn't it? Just to sell products sometimes, and especially in Japan, as I mentioned, I think the customer always wants something special.
Yeah.
So yeah,
Thank
that's
you.
my impression anyway. So, yeah.
Any question is okay?
I have one question.
Sure.
Do you have any examples of using these environments with reinforcement learning at all?
With what?
Reinforcement learning, so where this is the environment that you let the agents free in, basically?
Reinforcement learning.
So where machine learning, where we're teaching agents to maybe drive around, or your autonomous vehicles, that sort of stuff. Do you have any examples of that, or is it just human interaction with these environments that you've got?
Yes, interesting point. I'm probably not the best person to answer that. I mean, we have a development team in Japan who have all sorts of ideas about how this two-way interaction can go. I guess I have to say that.
Sorry,
I'm not.
I've got a background. I recognise a lot of your acronyms because I have a background in transport modelling. I think in this application, all the modeling's kind of done. A lot of it can be done through like the AIM-SUM models and stuff, and a lot of people are doing driver's car modelling through that. And I guess you would import that and then have a few different scenarios. I've seen research where they show a few different like driverless car scenarios, and then people are exposed in VR to these, different scenarios. Like, here's a driver's car, I walk in front of it, and it does this. Here's one where I do this. Here's a different intersection with a different driver's car model. So I think that's one way to kind of. But I'm not sure about reinforcement. I'm also confused about the reinforcement.
Yeah. So actually, on your point about AIM-SUM, of course you might be able to do that in AIM-SUM, but we actually can do that inside our software as well.
Yeah. Awesome.
So we have an autonomous vehicle. So to answer your question, it's probably more related to this, what we call the scenario function, which is how you program, for example, the driver training thing that I showed you. I didn't go into detail, but there's a scenario function where you specify it's an event programming thing where you specify what happens and then you give it triggers. So in terms of giving feedback to the scenario, yes, there's a whole range of things you can do, like press a key or turn the steering wheel or so there are ways of getting things back. Now, in terms of our people models, I wouldn't say they're as intelligent as the vehicle models. So the vehicle models, there's been a lot of work in there just because of the way things have developed.
Yeah.
Probably they are not considering.
So the vehicle models have a whole performance profile, and you can make them autonomous or lane keeping or whatever. In terms of the people, they are improved from before, but they're still not.
Yeah.
And that's an area where, if you had ideas, and, we really open to collaboration with academics and others. So,
yeah. We may
talk
also
to me
need
later.
lots of data or experiences to make it.
Sorry?
Yeah, we need more experience and data.
Yeah, we have a crowd simulation function, so you can put a volume of people in a path or a crowd, or, they can cross paths and things like that. So they do, move a bit intelligently, but I wouldn't say, they're like a first-person shooter thing. It's probably not our strength. Yeah.
So,
okay. Thanks very much.
Now it's time is up. So let's thank you again.